Blogtalk Radio.
This is the Art of Living Well Radio Network. Radio to inspire enlightened living. You're listening now to the Honest to God series with Angeal Rose and Ohonu.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our show today. It is a lovely, rainy San Diego morning. We are loving this delicious rain that we seldom get, and the little drops are dripping off our windowsill as the sun is actually peeking through the clouds. But yesterday, it was even better, Ohonu, because it was overcast all day long. As it rained late last night, and it was wildly windy, like a wild fall day. And this is fantastic. I know people who live in rainy climates probably don't think this is fantastic, but for us here in San Diego, where we get sun 360 days out of the year, that was a pleasure. It was cozy and romantic, wasn't it, Ohonu?
Angeal Rose, I really think you're in the wrong job. I think you should have been a weather person. Absolutely, yes. Because you describe it with such enthusiasm. And every week, you report, even though every week is more or less the same, except this week, of course, as you rightly point out, it is different. We have rain. And my God, isn't that something that we should relish here in Southern California? It's absolutely wonderful.
I'm sure the plants like it, for sure, because they seldom get any of it.
Yes.
Okay, but anyway, so yes, we have a wonderful show today. We hope our guest hasn't gotten the time wrong. She's calling from France, and it is Charlotte Young, who we've had on before. And we got discussing all sorts of feminine types of conversation, and we never got to her real passion, which is the importance of breast milk and breastfeeding children in relation to society and the change we're in. So I do hope she does get to us.
Well, what's interesting about Charlotte is that when we put out a request some time ago for people to contact us if they had a story to tell, we got this reply from Charlotte Young in France. She said, "The focus of my passion is freedom. Freeing the world of the bondage to the agroalimentary industry that restrict our choices to bad food that makes us sick, then enslaves us to the pharmaceutical industry, us on synthetic medication, all to end up in neurologically damaged bodies hooked up onto machines to prolong our hospitals, making millions on keeping us alive as long as possible." Well, let's say freedom from lies, propaganda, and hidden knowledge that maintain us through control, through fear. We're in a revolution, she says. But like all peaceful revolutions, this is going to take some time. But we've been slowly getting there since the 1960s. In fact, there is actually so much more to this lady than that. Her true essence, as Angeal Rose pointed out, is about rejoicing in the power of creating life with their bodies and sustaining that life with the milk that our bodies produce is part of women's right to confidence in themselves and recognition as the most valuable members of society. Wow, aren't we in for a real treat? Now, I do see that she's trying to connect from France, so it's hopping in and out, but we will just make a few of our announcements while she just ensures her connection there from France. And she's a speaker. I spent a little bit of time in the south of France also. I'm not sure if she's in the south of France or in Paris, but we'll find out about that. But certainly the south of France, weather-wise, is absolutely marvelous. And she spent some time down there in Cannes and Monaco, and she was a Club Med, a bilingual hostess with Club Med for some time. And she has an absolutely fascinating past where she taught skiing for 2 winters with Club Med, both in Italy and south of France. And she was an interpreter, a hostess, and she did seminars in Nice, Monaco and Cannes, and oh my God, she's got such a fantastic experience and multilingual along with it. But let's go to our announcements first. Angeal Rose has some wonderful things to tell you.
All right. Well, for those who've been asking me for the past year to be teaching how to read the Akashic Records, I am putting together a seminar for that next year. The date is February 22nd. It will be held in San Diego. I don't have the place yet, but if you are interested in that course, do let me know. I'll put you on the list. So that is new. I'm speedily working away on my second book, which will be out in April next year, called The Nature of Reality, which will be manuscripts from the group sessions we have had where people have asked all those interesting topics about consciousness and reality and time and dimensions and angels and ascended masters and love and miracles and dreams and all different things about the Kundalini will be in that one. That wonderful session we did last week will be in there, as well as the one this week, tomorrow. Our group session tomorrow will be on the chakras, and that will be beginning at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and you can register for that at theworldofempowerment.com.
Let me just interject there for a moment, Angeal Rose, because I think it needs to be explained exactly the power of those sessions. We've done a lot of group sessions so far for people from all over the world online, and they have been general sessions where people can ask questions of a wide nature, like what Angeal Rose mentioned, everything from angels to zombies, absolutely, in the world in terms of reality and what we perceive as reality. But the last few times we've been topic specific, and what we did on consciousness was nothing short of mind-blowing. It really was absolutely stunning information. And then we moved on and we did another session on Kundalini, and the information that we got through Angeal Rose from Source about Kundalini is like nothing you've ever heard or read anywhere. And the exact same thing happened last week when we did Twin Flames and Soulmates. And, I really do need to emphasize how stunning this information is. And you can actually get hold of it by going to worldofempowerment.com. There is a charge because there's a huge cost to us in terms of the transcription. Not much, though, in terms of the cost to you, because we need to disseminate. We are really, really conscious of disseminating this information throughout the world. It's absolutely valuable and really, really, really profound.
I think that you're hooked. You're hooked on those group sessions. I think you're an addict.
I'm hooked on you, Angeal Rose.
No, we did find last week when we asked Source's definition of Kundalini, Source's first response was that it was the path of courage. And I thought that was really, really interesting because it did go into this inner journey that we take as souls through our chakra system as we spiral up the vertical column, and that there are virtues or planes of existence in those chakras along the way that present certain challenges to the soul and tests and trials, and for the purpose of us achieving victories and virtues on our way to becoming God realized. So it was very, very fascinating, as was the one we did on consciousness and how we think. And, why we do these is because once you go in the records and you speak to Source usually has a very different definition of things that we take for granted. It's also the reason we're doing the chakras tomorrow, because I've had an inkling for some time now that there's more about those chakras than we know. So I wanted to explore them, especially in relation to the conversation on Kundalini last week, because we really didn't go into the chakras at all, just were made aware of how that energy does spiral up through the different chakras. So we're going to get some definition from Source on what the chakras are and what their purpose and use is, and what do they really mean to us. Are they just something stuck in the biology. And I just want to mention this about the biology, about our bodies, is that even though in most spiritual traditions, we all recognize that we're made of spirit and we're going to return to spirit. And, of course, a big, common saying in the world today is the one thing that you can be sure will always happen is you will die. But once we explored the Kundalini and we realized that that's not necessarily the way it's supposed to be or indeed has to be. So this process of becoming God-man does overcome biological death, and it gives you the allowance of body into light when you leave or leaving it behind. But while we're here, I think it needs to be said that the physical body is a real miraculous invention. It really is. And even though we may not like the limitations of it, the truth is we have a chemistry inside us that is literally an alchemical furnace. And it can go from, just a common man, which goes through a normal cycle of, birth and death, or it can transform and regenerate itself and totally change into a God-man. So, it's given us a new awareness, especially exploring the Kundalini last week, where we realized that the Kundalini is a fail-safe within us in our biology, where it actually is our life force currents, and it can remain dormant and just do its minimal job by being a normal person in this world, or it can be activated and cause all sorts of chemical changes within the body, and sure enough, in our consciousness as well. So, we've been safeguarded on every single level, and I find that just absolutely amazing.
Well, now, Angeal Rose, you mentioned that about how we think and what we think, and this is our subject today also, albeit about breastfeeding and lactation and so on, because there is a malaise out there, let's call it, or a way of thinking or a belief system around all of this that our guest today, Charlotte Young, will be explaining to us. And she leads workshops on breastfeeding in the RAP. She participates in breastfeeding support groups. Her associations are very active and growing. She actually founded the Anglophone Natural Parenting Association. And in 2005, she founded Allaitement pour tout, an association of a mother-to-mother support group of users. And she's involved with breastfeeding right at the cutting edge. And she's proud to be part of that new conversation, that new way of thinking. And she wants that to be on every government agenda all over the world, including those what we consider to be developed countries and undeveloped countries, rejoicing in the power of creating life with their bodies, is what she says, and sustaining that life with the milk that our bodies produce is part of women's right to confidence in themselves and recognition as the most valuable members of society. The last time she was on, a couple of months ago, we spoke about the fact that that line of thinking, the old line of thinking, was that women were inferior to men, that breast reduction surgery impaired breastfeeding. The instructions that were given from pediatricians to mothers was a little patriarchal, let's say. There's also this concept of competition, not only between men and women, but between one breast and the other, that one is better than the other. We spoke also in general about justice, health, religion. We spoke about men wearing robes, believe it or not, Roman and Egyptian women. We talked about the origin of war and caring as being primary in society. We spoke about the importance of creeping and crawling and balance, home births, and finally, coming around full circle, we then spoke about breaking free of the dogma around breastfeeding. So let's get on to our wonderful guest today, Charlotte Young. We've got a large number of people who are waiting in the aisles to listen and hear what Charlotte has to say.
Hi, Charlotte. Are you there?
Me. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're so glad you're back. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. I couldn't hear the first time. It was static, so I had to call back.
Okay.
So
well,
here we are.
Ohonu,
Thank you for Thank you for a beautiful introduction.
I know. Didn't he do such a wonderful job?
Fabulous. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's pick this up from where we left off. Let's get right into it, Charlotte, because last time you were on, we never got to your wonderful subject. So I'm going to let you bring it forth in terms of how you want to begin this conversation today.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to make a declaration, which is something that I think we should require from everybody who talks about any kind of infant feeding, okay? So I want to declare that I have no links to any commercialized foods or products, and that what I'm about to say is in no way or form advertising or marketing. I am an active part of a social movement to claim sovereignty over our bodies and to be able to make informed choices about what we feed our babies. So whatever I say, I don't want to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do. All I want to do is give the information that everybody should have been given before they are asked to make any kind of choice on how they feed their babies.
I love it. Okay, great.
Okay, so that's the declaration. Now, Ohonu mentioned the things that we had talked about the last time, so that is true. That's great. That's a great summary of what we talked about. One of the things we talked about is this concept of one milk being better than the other. Okay, so it's true that babies need milk, and what is true, we know that scientifically, is that human babies need human milk, and calves need cow milk, and lambs need sheep milk, and baby goats, I can't remember the name for baby goats. Baby goats need goat milk. I mean, and rats need rat milk, and cats need cat milk, and dogs need dog milk, and mice need mouse milk, and rabbits need rabbit milk, and whales need whale milk, etc. So everybody needs the milk from their own species. That is true. And when a mammal gets milk from their own species, that is the biological norm. So there's a kind of sort of it's a paradoxical sales line, which is human milk is better, breast milk is the best, which would indicate that there's something else that's normal, and that breast milk is better than the norm. Okay, now that is a very subtle, hidden way of trashing breast milk, and the reason I say that is because most people in the world don't consider they absolutely need the best. I mean, there's somebody in Australia who came out with this concept first, and her talk was called "Breast Milk is no longer the best." So everybody clicked on it and said, "What? I beg your pardon?" And she said to the people in the crowd, "How many of you have come here today to this conference wearing clothes made by Dior?" And of course, everybody laughed. "And how many of you have come here made in clothes by Armani?" Everybody laughed. And they said, "How many of you drive around in Rolls Royces or Ferraris?" And everybody laughed. And they said, "So how many of you really consider that you need the best and that you will ensure and you will do whatever it takes to obtain the best?" And of course, nobody raised their hands. So that is the message that breast milk is the best or better actually makes people think, "Oh, yeah, well, okay, but I don't really need the best. So I'll take good enough. I'll go and get good enough." You see what I mean by the subtle message that gives?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
Are you wearing Chanel or Dior right now, by the way?
No, not at all.
Do you often go out and shop for Chanel, Dior, or Armani?
No.
Neither do I. It's funny. Yes, it is supposedly the best.
Yeah,
so
that's interesting.
It's true that concept of the best, 99.9% of the planet, maybe more, consider that they don't need the best, so they'll take good enough. Okay, so let's get things down to biological facts. Human milk for human babies, that is the norm. That's the biological norm. with human milk for human babies for a biologically normal duration, health risks would be normal. They would be whatever your genetic calling card has given to you. If you don't give human milk to your babies, you create unnecessary health risks. If the baby gets some human milk but not exclusively, you create fewer still unnecessary health risks. If your baby gets exclusive human milk but for a shorter than what is biologically normal duration, you have fewer health risks, but still probably unnecessary. So the truth is, because people say, so what are the advantages? So the question, of course, is advantages on what? On the norm? Well, there are no advantages on the norm. It is the norm. Are there advantages from, the truth is, no, there are no advantages. There are only disadvantages. And the disadvantages to not getting human milk or not getting it for the biologically normal duration are correspond to the duration of human, the duration of time that the person has got human breast milk. That's what it boils down to. And now let's talk about, so risks. Haven't got your web page up on my computer. Are you flashing the pages of the lists of studies?
No, we don't have that up, but we can certainly put that up for you.
Okay, well, can I say that if anybody would like to have those files that I sent you, that they can we say that? Can they ask you by email, or can you put them somewhere where people can download them? Super. Okay,
yes,
great.
Absolutely. In fact, if anybody wants to contact us, either on the phone as a guest call-in, simply call 805-292-0349, or email us at angealrose@angealrose.com. But let me spell that, Charlotte, just for a moment to interrupt you, because the spelling is difficult enough. It's AINGEALROSE.com, angealrose@angealrose.com. If anybody wants to email us, we'll certainly put up those links to those scientific studies that you mentioned. But can I also mention just one other thing real quick? Charlotte Young, our guest today, is in France on a Skype call. There is that little bit of skip in the line, so do bear with us. It reminds us of the old days with telephones when you're calling around the other side of the world, where this is bouncing off satellites and things. So there is that small delay in response. So if we overspeak each other, do bear with us. We apologize for that in advance. Go ahead there, Charlotte.
Okay, thanks. One of the things I sent you is a poster. Also, it's in PDF format of ingredients. And there is a list on the left of ingredients of breast milk, and on the right there's the list of ingredients of formula or artificial milk or human substitute milks. That's another concept that people don't seem to be familiar with. Once you understand that human milk is made for human babies, and the only milk that's adapted to human needs is human milk, people say, oh, yes, but cow milk has lots of calcium in it. So after breastfeeding, what about follow-up milk or just ordinary cow's milk for the calcium? And actually, since we have scientific studies, so excluding marketing, which is advertising, biologically speaking, human bodies cannot assimilate the calcium, the size of the calcium or the quantity of calcium that is present in cow's milk. So actually what happens is we're all born with a certain number of osteoblasts, which is it's something that assimilates calcium in our bones. We're all born with a certain number of osteoblasts. So if you're breastfed with human milk for the biologically normal duration, you get exactly what you need in calcium, and your calcium needs following that are perfectly satisfied by fruit, vegetable, nuts, grains, whatever's on the human menu. Definitely not by other species milk, and definitely not by those plant extracts that people tend to call milk. I mean, if you want to eat a handful of almonds, great, that's super. It's got lots of calcium, almonds. But drinking almond extract, I mean, I'm not going to knock people who drink almond extract and call it milk, but it doesn't respond to human needs in the same way that a handful of chewing up real almonds would. So let's go with the calcium thing. So let's say human milk provides exactly the kind of calcium that we need for the duration that we need it, as long as we're breastfed for the normal duration. Following that, what can we eat to get the right amount of calcium? Well, the answer is fruit, vegetables, grains, nuts, whatever's on the human menu. But we do not need, there is absolutely nothing in cow's milk that we need if we have a balanced diet without cow's milk. And if we do bombard our...
Yeah. Can I ask you real quick, Charlotte, about the condition of the health of the mother? In other words, does every mother, let's say you have a mother who's delivered a child, and let's say she's not necessarily that healthy, or she's not that nutritionally sound. Does that affect the quality of her milk, and what do you do in those cases?
No, it does not affect the quality of the milk. That's one of the myths that is difficult to stamp out. That's a myth. If you look at the mothers in Afghanistan, some of those mothers have nothing more than one tomato per day to eat, and their babies are fine. There's nothing wrong with those babies. They're nutritionally in good health. What we do see is sick breastfed babies because the babies are not kept in the mother's arms. They have traditionally, this is a tribal tradition, it's nothing to do with religion. In tribes that have traditionally been warrior tribes, those tribes traditionally devalue anything to do with nurturing and mothering. So, and we've inherited that in Europe as well. One of those traditions is to put baby in cots or cribs or cradles. And you can see the ones that are the worst you can imagine. They have a little hole drilled into them so that the pee-pee and the poop can drain out. Sometimes little boys are fixed up with little tubes so that when they pee, it actually is accompanied out the little hole drilled in the bottom of the cradle. And at the top of the cradle, each end of the cradle has a kind of V shape, so it looks like a tripod. At the top of those two triangular shaped bars that come up from the ends of the cradle is one bar that it looks like it's made to be carrying the cradle for. So if you can imagine this bar going from end to end about anywhere from 50 centimeters to 75 centimeters above the cot itself, that is made so that the mother doesn't pick up the baby. It's made so that she has to come home from the fields wherever she's working. She's got to feed the baby. So she grasps this bar above the cradle and leans forward over the cradle to offer her breast. So the baby can suckle, can get the breast milk from the breast without actually being picked up and held in arms. Now, what happens in countries like Afghanistan is that, and many other countries, it was also in France as well, because I've seen those cradles in France, in those old museums you see when you go from, mountain villages or whatever, they have these little museums. I've seen it in many countries in Europe, these cradles. So the mother leans over the cot, offers the breast, the baby gets his composition, but he doesn't get the neurological needs satisfied because he's not held in arms. Now, in Afghanistan and other countries like that, a young bride will move from her family's house to the husband's family's house, where she has to live with her mother-in-law. Now, the mother-in-law is the head of the household, and mother-in-laws generally like it when a new bride comes to the house because the new bride will be made to do all the hard work, like fetching water and whatever the hard work is. So that new bride will be the new sort of, I call it a slave contract. This marriage contracts in many countries are basically slavery contracts. Free slavery, slavery is free. Free slavery contracts. So they get this free slave in the home, and that's the new bride. She has to do whatever the mother-in-law dictates. And if there's a kind of polygamy situation where there are several wives, it's always the newcomer who has to do all the worst work. So every time a new wife comes, every previous wife gets bumped up in the hierarchy, so has a little less work to do. So let's say she's just had a baby. She has to stop doing what she's doing in the fields or working at what she's doing to come and feed the baby because the baby has to be fed. So, but that's how she does it. She leans over to spend as little time as possible feeding the baby and getting bonded with the baby and getting attached to the baby. And so she'll breastfeed like that. So the baby basically gets the composition of breast milk, but doesn't get the neurological needs satisfied. Which brings us to the question of distribution method. Now, the distribution method of artificial milk obviously is a plastic or glass recipient with an artificial nipple in the form of a human nipple. Now, at the turn of the century when these things became common, that was the cause of about 90% of the death rates, the mortality rate of babies because of the lack of hygiene in the situation. Right. Running water was not common in people's individual houses, and nobody knew that washing hands and washing generally was really important to health. So I don't know, maybe they did rinse them at least. I don't know. But all I know is when you read the history of this, there's an excellent book. It's called, I have to find it. It's by Gabrielle Palmer. The Politics of Breastfeeding. That's it, The Politics of Breastfeeding. And she writes all about the history of how artificial feeding became the cultural norm in our country, our Occidental countries. And she writes about this nipple problem, the lack of hygiene. So all these babies were dying like flies because the artificial milk would get stuck in the end of the nipple, and it would create salmonella or whatever the illnesses were, food poisoning basically, and the babies would die of food poisoning from diarrhea, from draining themselves of all water. So that is the distribution method for artificial feeding. There's no contact necessary with a human being. There are even contraptions you can buy today where you stick the baby into a kind of car seat, and you can attach a kind of thing that hooks onto the car seat, a little pivot where you place the baby bottle in the pivot, and you swivel it in front of the baby, tilt it towards the baby, and the baby can drink from the bottle without being in a human being's arms.
As
like
you're driving
hamster,
along.
basically it works. It works like a hamster situation. The baby drinks from the bottle without being in the arms because it's a kind of thing that holds it, an arm that holds it. Or there's a kind of bib you can attach around the baby's neck with a kind of bean bag at the bottom of the bib that tilts the bottom of the bottle up, and he can drink from that. So that's how far we've gone from the biological norm. I mean, it's really serious, the marketing of all these gadgets to get away from the baby and to not hold the baby in our arms. When you hold the baby in your arms, whether it's skin to skin or body to body, babies basically need skin to skin for about 2 months. After about 2 months, let's say an at-term baby, they start to sort of push away from skin to skin for some reason. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's they get too hot or they sweat. I don't know what it is, but they really need skin to skin to satisfy neurological needs for about 2 months. After that, human needs for body-to-body contact are about 3 years, let's say 3 to 6 years for this intense body contact. Now, what happens when you breastfeed or when you just hold your baby in your arms is that their neurons connect in a way they're supposed to. So we call that optimal neurological development. There's a term we have in France, it's called synaptique. I don't know if you have that word in English, synaptic connections, maybe. Anyway, the synaptic connections are made in an optimal way when you hold your baby in body-to-body contact. So let's say you do hold your baby in body-to-body contact because your distribution method is the breast. Then you are not only ensuring the composition, the optimal composition, but you're also ensuring optimal neurological development. So that is, if you will, that's a kind of how to explain why it is the biological norm for human beings. That's how you get the optimal biological norm.
That would be a precursor to creeping, wouldn't it, Charlotte?
I'm sorry?
Would that be a precursor to creeping?
Body-to-body contact?
Yes, because you're talking about the neurological health and development of the infant. So I'm just suggesting, do they go from that to creeping, which also continues neurological development?
Probably. I would say the next step, I don't think one has to stop for the other to start. I think the body-to-body contact is really absolutely vitally important till between age 3 and 6. But of course, they're going to start crawling at 7 months or like around a year, just before a year, I suppose they're going to start crawling or even creeping. So I wouldn't say one has to happen before the other. I think there's definitely a time when body-to-body contact is still necessary and they're creeping anyway. I think, from what I understand, creeping ensures motor, what's it called? Motor dexterity. Hang on. What is the term? Brain motor coordination or something. There's an illness. I had a kid in one of my ski classes that had that, and the mother didn't tell me. There's a term. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember it.
That's okay. But what is the normal breastfeeding time?
Time, you mean duration?
How long should you breastfeed your baby?
Okay. Well, I'd like to take should out of my language. Let's just talk, and I don't want to say that any individual should do anything. I just want to give the information. So the biological norm for breast milk, for the duration of access to breast milk, and then we have to get into frequency because it's going to scare a lot of people, is until the milk teeth come out. And we all know at what age the milk teeth come out. Okay. And it's also indicated by the time that the human immune system becomes mature. So until the human immune system becomes mature, it is in the beginning almost wholly, but completely, but in the end at least partially dependent on the immune support that human milk gives to the human immune system. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, what? 6 or 7 years of breastfeeding? What? No other mammal on the planet breastfeeds for 6 or 7 years. And actually, in fact, they do. All mammals breastfeed for an equivalent. Now, we have to take into account lifespan of various animals. I think elephants live to be 100 years or something, but other mammals, like a dog, for example, dogs live from 10 to 20 years, I guess. Deer, I don't know how long deer live for. Rats live for, I think, less than 10 years. Mice, probably less than 10. Whatever the mammal is, they have their ordinary lifespan. So when you take into account their lifespan, what it's equivalent to is about 6 or 7 human years. And all that is published on a really great website called the Natural Child Project, if anybody's interested in looking it up. On the Natural Child Project website, you can look up breastfeeding, and it talks about the biological norms. So now the other half of the world is saying, no way I'm going to breastfeed for that long. You guys are all crazy. To which I say, I understand that if you think that you have to breastfeed 8 to 12 times per 24 hours for 6 or 7 years, you're right. That's not doable. It's not feasible. That would be insanity. I totally agree. So now that we know what the biological norm is for duration, the frequency changes a lot according to the age of the child. When a newborn is born, let's say that he has no sucking problems, he doesn't have a tight frenulum, he doesn't have tongue tie, he's got no tight jaw, his head cranial structure is not tight, he's just there's nothing wrong with him. Those ordinary term babies will breastfeed between 8 and 12 times per 24 hours in the beginning in order to start lactation. It's called lactogenese 3, actually. That's the medical term or scientific term, lactogenese 3. So after the first few days of colostrum, which is like the butter or the cream. It's all of the composition of breast milk, all concentrated into a very, very, very small amount. It's not diluted. It's orange color, which is the carotene that's in it. And it's got, in it is all the immunities to all the illnesses that person has ever had, that mother has ever had. The cells in her body have got cellular memory, and they remember how she dealt with whatever illness she's gone through in her life, and all those that is in every cell in that colostrum. So the baby gets this buttery, thick, it comes out drop by drop substance called colostrum the first few days, and the baby's tummy is really, really small. His stomach is about the size of a marble, about the size of a marble. So let's say your index fingernail cubed. Okay, so it's about that big, his tummy. So in order to not stretch his tummy, he needs to get that colostrum very, very frequently. And it just so happens that in order to jumpstart breastfeeding properly, you need to breastfeed very, very frequently. So let's say the baby has no sucking technique problems, and so therefore it doesn't hurt the mother. There's no pain involved. So she breastfeeds 8 to 12 times within 24 hours. Let's say it's 12 to 15 those first few days, if the baby stays awake long enough. She gets it going after 3 to 5 days. 5 days if the birth has been by cesarean, or perhaps longer, depending on how frequently she started in the beginning. The milk suddenly starts getting diluted. You have the same composition as the colostrum, plus a lot more lactose and protein because it's now diluted. It's getting to be mature milk. So the baby will breastfeed according to the heat, according to whatever his sucking technique capabilities are. The average is between 8 to 12 times per 24 hours. Now, how long does that last? Well, let's say, I know that in the U.S. you go back to work after, I think it's between 3 and 6 weeks. Well, here in France, it's, I think 10 weeks. So let's say about 2.5, 3 months, mothers go back to work. So breasts actually need to be stimulated fairly frequently, so between 8 and 12 times per 24 hours, until the baby's about 12 months old. So we have in France, and I think it applies to all countries in Europe. It's le droit de travail. How do you say that? It's employment law. It's the law. It's the law. You are legally entitled to 1 hour. It's called breastfeeding break. 1 hour breastfeeding break per day as an employee, and that can be taken in the form of 2 30-minute breaks to pump milk in the company, or to breastfeed your baby in the company. Right. And that law is valid until the baby is 12 months old. And so that means she can, if she wants, take a little breast pump to work or leave it there and pump her milk twice a day for 30 minutes, or leave 1 hour early. It's up to her to decide with her employer which her choice is. And if she ensures that kind of frequency until about the age of 12 months, as of the age of 12 months, 1 breastfeed per day, between 1 and 2 breastfeed per day for most women is enough to ensure maintenance, or to ensure the continuation of lactation. Mm-hmm. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering about do you think that is now the norm, or what is the percentage of women that actually know that or have a desire to continue that pattern up to 12 months or after 12 months?
Okay, now it gets down to marketing and commerce. In countries priority to marketing, commerce, financial growth, commercial growth, whatever you want to call it, they will give priority to sales. So they won't quote the WHO human health recommendations. They will quote whatever recommendations they choose, and give priority to sales and marketing. So I know the American Academy of Pediatrics recommend 1 year of breastfeeding, which is just at that point, just at 1 year, that's when 1 or 2 feeds per day are enough to maintain human lactation. So it's kind of insane. I find it insane to wean a child at the age of 1 year when suddenly you can start breastfeeding once or twice a day and maintain lactation. And if you get to 2 years, a few feeds per week are enough to maintain lactation. Now, the World Health Organization and the Torah, the Jewish Torah, and the Islamic Quran both recommend also a minimum of 2 years of breastfeeding, 2 years of human milk. So we got the World Health Organization.
WHO recommendation.
Yeah.
Is it, Charlotte? Yeah.
Yeah. WHO, World Health Organization recommendations. It's not worded that way, and I don't know why. I put it down to bad translation. The way it's worded is up to and beyond 2 years. So up to me means until, and beyond means more than. So if you say up to and beyond, it's a paradox. It's self-contradictive. I don't know why they haven't said the truth, which is at least 2 years, and more if desired by the mother and the baby. The way it's worded is up to and beyond 2 years if desired by the mother and the baby. That's the official wording.
Sorry, Charlotte. Let me just ask you a quick question, but I'd like to take just a very, very quick studio break, and maybe when we come right back, that you might answer it. And it's to do with the instinct of the mother. I want to know, you've got all these commercial recommendations and you've all these medical recommendations and so on. But in terms of the mother's own instinct, I want to know, does that ever override all these commercial interests? But save your answer until we come right back after this break.
Okay.
This is the Art of Living Well Radio Network. Radio to inspire enlightened living. The Honest to God series with Angeal Rose and Ohonu.
You're very, very welcome back. You're listening to myself, Ohonu, and Angeal Rose, and we have a very special guest today with us, Charlotte Young, who's an equalist, a lactivist, and a transmitter of knowledge. And we're speaking particularly about breastfeeding. And just before the break, I asked her about the cultural norm and the instinct of the mother to breastfeed and how long that goes in for, and can she override those commercial interests? Go ahead, Charlotte.
Thanks. Well, the commercial interests are something that are imposed and spread by government and commerce. Of course, the two, government by definition is commercially interested. That's just a given. That's just a given. So once you have a government that's commercially interested, of course, things are going to be influenced by that. Now, what might overcome government recommendations is when the individual has information that enables them to make an informed choice. Now, in France, it's all about choice. Oh, yes, but it's a mother's choice. But how many people are making an honest choice if they're not informed, if they're not fully informed about the choice they're making? I don't call that a choice. If you're not aware of everything that contributes to your choice, then it's not really a choice. So I think it's kind of a dishonest term, saying, oh, but it's somebody's choice. Excuse me. So you mentioned mother's instinct. Okay, that's something that I'm very interested in because I had 2 cesareans. So everything that I might have called instinct went out the window because I was hormonally completely screwed up. I had lost all confidence. I was a neurotic, emotional, hormonal wreck. I'd gone through a medicalized birth. So any instinct I might have had went out the window. I had to go purely and strictly by the books from then on. So I remember my mother when I was a child telling me how important it was to breastfeed because I had an aunt who didn't breastfeed. So I knew it was a big deal, breastfeeding. I just didn't know anything about it. So I asked everybody around me, my environment, my culture, the people, my entourage all around me, and my information depended on what they knew. And of course, they hadn't read anything, so they didn't know anything. So once I joined the Leche League, then I had access to a library full of books based on scientific research. So that's when everything changed for me. But this thing about instinct, really, it's something that disturbs me a lot, because I personally think that instinct does not exist. I think it's a word that covers a lot of things. It's highly interpretable. And I think what influenced the mother, because hormones, you can't count on hormones to influence a mother. Mm-hmm. If she's had a medicalized birth, forget it. Nothing is going to be true. How many women have home births? Right. Assisted, where she's immediately put in skin to skin with a baby. The baby is never taken away from her. The baby starts breastfeeding right away, like a charm. How many women does that happen to? Well, I would like to say that the number of women who have not had home births and who have not had their babies put on their body right after birth and never taken off their body until the mother does it herself for whatever reason, I would say those are the number of women who have what people call instinct affected, impacted, hurt, compromised. So I think what the truth is, I don't think anybody can rely on what people call instinct. I think what influences mothers, apart from information, the first information they receive is cultural indoctrination, family influence, which affects, of course, her confidence, which means that she will choose to either listen to her baby or listen to what other people are telling her. If you have enough information,
Charlotte?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Sorry, let me ask you, just before you move on from that point, do you think then, I don't want to get into conspiracy theories and that kind of thing, but do you think that there's a general move afoot to get away from the nature of childbirth and breastfeeding and move it into the commercialization of it all? In general.
Well, I would just like to change the terminology. I would like to say there has been a major move towards medicalization of giving birth and feeding babies. In the 1950s, Rockefeller and Carnegie created a huge grant system where they made major grants to universities that accepted to change their curriculum from health and healing to pharmaceutics. And so little by little, all those medical schools that had previously focused on health died out. And what are we left with? We're left with medical schools that train people to use pharmaceutics. So also in the late 1950s, a lot of countries and states outlawed midwifery. So all the practices that midwives had been using for hundreds of years and all the knowledge and wisdom that had been passed from mother to daughter who were midwives, which in French, the French word is really good. It's sage femme. Femme is woman, and sage means knowledge or wisdom. So they were called, translated directly, that would be wise women. So all the practices and knowledge that all these wise women had for generations and hundreds of years, or at least those who survived the Spanish Inquisition, in any case, where millions of women were burned at the stake specifically because they had that knowledge, they were suddenly outlawed. And they were considered, and I've talked to French doctors about that. I said, can you believe it? Midwifery was outlawed because doctors were saying that they were uneducated and dirty. And you know what the reply came from one of the doctors who I said that to? He said, yes, well, it was true.
True.
So
God.
that was the general view of midwives by a lot of people coming out of the medical schools as of the late 1950s. So let's say there has been a huge commercial push program to make women believe that they needed medicalization in order to do what their bodies are naturally built to do. Yes. I'm not denying that women do need to be accompanied. But as Michel Odon says, who set up the Primal Health center in the UK because he's so disgusted by the medical birthing practices in France and now lives in the UK. He says one midwife, not several midwives, not a lot of people, not interns. He doesn't even think that men are necessary at birth. I tend to agree with that because I believe personally, it's my personal belief. I don't say anybody else has to take that, but I personally believe that giving birth is a mother's business. It's a woman's business. And it's a woman's affair. It's something that happens entirely to the woman's body. It concerns her. It's her hormones, and it's between her and the baby. And if she needs a wise woman to be there, to help her through, to help her change positions or to know when to change positions, to do whatever movements or give her whatever plants or whatever it is that she might need at a specific time that only that wise woman would know, I believe midwives are absolutely essential to a knowledgeable midwife is absolutely essential to giving birth, personally for safety's sake. And traditionally that has been recognized since humanity, since before writing was invented. Midwives have always accompanied mothers. But
and
when
is that
they were
changing all over the world, Charlotte? Is that changing all over the world with this push for commercialization and they move away from the biological norm that you mentioned?
It has changed.
Is that happening in every country?
I would say it's slowing down. It's slowing down to a great degree. It had been happening. It started in the late 50s, or at least in the U.S. It started in the late 50s. And because U.S. has always been considered the leader because of their economic power, everybody wants to follow the U.S. and whatever the U.S. does is right and whatever the U.S. does is the best and it's the example for all to follow. So when it started in the U.S., all the other countries followed. Oh, the U.S. is focusing on pharmaceutics in their medical schools? Well, we should do that too. You know, it serves two purposes. It boosts the economy and it creates a huge growth in that particular industry. And by the same token, it can save lives. Okay, admittedly, it can save lives. But until the 1970s, the rate of cesareans in the U.S. was between 3 and 5%. And if an obstetrician, his percentage of cesareans went above 5%, he was hauled in front of the direction and he was asked for explanations. Now, cesarean rates are between 25 and I think it's 85% in Brazil. So what has happened? Women's bodies suddenly changed so that they're suddenly incompetent and unable to expel a baby with a midwife properly? No, I don't think so. Why is it that the vast majority of births are happening before the weekend now, whereas until the 1970s, the days that babies were born on in the week was equal. Between Sunday and Saturday, you know, babies were born. It was all spaced out evenly. They were born on any day in the week: Sunday's child, Monday's child, Tuesday's child, etc. Now, the majority of babies are born before the weekend. You know, Thursday, Friday, or before the weekend.
Tell us, Charlotte, what kind of a psychological or emotional or neurological difference does that make to the baby? I know that's a kind of an impossible question, but in your experience, what impact does that have in society in general and to the individual child? Well,
it interferes with all the neurological and, can I say, and I don't know how to say that in English, and endocrinological. Well, let's stick to neurological. Yes. It interferes with all the neurological and hormonal processes that contribute to optimal development. Voilà. It interferes with optimal development, optimal hormone, optimal neurology. That is what we call...
Yes. Tell me, is it possible...
Sorry.
Is it possible to recover from this degradation, let's call it in general? Is it possible that the human form, the human biology, can recover from it, and that mothers can recover that wise woman knowledge? Is that possible?
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk about an individual. Let's say an individual has had a medicalized birth, like I have had, so I can speak not only from what I've read in books, but also from experience. According to blood tests, Some yes, some no. Yes, you can attach to your child. Apparently, bonding is impossible. Once there's medical intervention, bonding is out the window. You can't recuperate that. But attachment, you can. Yes, you can catch up on attachment. Yes, the baby can attach to the mother. Yes, the mother can attach to the baby. So on an individual level, yes. Now, when you're talking about cultural indoctrination, which is, of course, commercially influenced, we've got to the problem of family influence. Now, families will make choices. Families are going to choose, whatever worked for them a few generations ago and carry it on by tradition. And if they're still in a warrior type mentality, then the way they live is all going to be directed by fear of punishment, need for obedience, need for compliancy, and you have people making choices not by cooperation, need to cooperate and clear vision of what is right and what is wrong and what is true and what is just, and depending on what their heart tells them, but by fear of punishment or fear of pain. So that goes from the culture to the family. Now, if a mother has broken off from that kind of what we call toxic family influence, she will have confidence and she'll be able to make her choices according to what she really feels. If she doesn't have confidence and she's still stuck in that kind of mentality, she's going to be stuck in that vicious circle of needing to please first either her husband or her mother or her father or whatever it is that keeps her in that vicious circle. And the family, of course, will be responding to their need to comply to or obey or be part of whatever the cultural dogma is. So let's say we do have a whole generation of young women who not only have broken off from that vicious circle of fear and fear of punishment, and they are making decisions based on what they know and what they feel, and who have confidence. Yes, absolutely. That's the whole point of having mothers' meetings. One of the 10 criteria for having the baby-friendly label that medicalized birthing places, so these hospitals where you have a medicalized birth, they can get this thing called the baby-friendly initiatives or the baby-friendly label, which is a WHO thing again, if they can adhere to 10 criteria. And I haven't got them in front of me right now, but one of those criteria is providing the mother with names and addresses of breastfeeding associations or groups that will support breastfeeding mothers. Now, in many countries, it is illegal to have more than 3 women gather at the same time. That is because if you want to maintain a warrior establishment, a warrior kind of a warrior society situation, culture, you don't want women supporting each other. You don't want nurturing values involved in that particular society. Fortunately, we live in the Occidental world, so we can have more than 3 women gathering at a time. So in communities all over the world, we have Allaitement groups, we have other breastfeeding support groups, maybe not with the same training that Allaitement leaders get, because they get really in-depth training for breastfeeding support. And women will get together and will support each other. So yes, the more of those little groups that are formed, the thicker the network gets. And the more it connects, the more we're going to cover the planet.
Charlotte, I have a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to go back to when women do breastfeed because, I have heard some women say that they had to go to formula because their body wasn't producing milk or their breasts weren't, adequate enough or it was too hard. So I want to talk about those problems, but then I also want to address the body image that women have also about they don't want to breastfeed because they don't want their breasts to get saggy. This is one of the biggest things. So, they're going to, keep their body and try to get back in shape as quick as possible. So there's this big push, for women to get back to their girly figures after they give birth. So could you address all of that? Because, personally, I think that's disgusting, my own personal feelings, because I breastfed all of my children, and I had 2 of them with midwives and 1 in the hospital. And each birth was so different because of the way that I gave birth. But, really, I hear this all the time where, they don't want their breasts ruined, But honestly, I always thought that breastfeeding actually puts the womb back in shape faster. And could you address those concerns?
Okay, sure. Now, just so that you know, these are the questions you're asking me now go into the domain of lactation consultant. Those are things that get much more technical on the mechanics of it and technique and identifying what the problem is. When you go to breastfeeding support groups, they're not necessarily going to have this expertise. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but it's not always a guarantee. So if a mother ever says, oh, I couldn't breastfeed for X reason, it's just simply a question of not having had access to the correct information that applied to her particular situation. So basically everyone can breastfeed. I have founded 2 associations here. So one, the Anglophone Natural Parenting Association, and the second one is called Allaitement pour tous, which means breastfeeding for all. Because I discovered in my particular case, which is breastfeeding after breast reduction surgery, that with a little bit of help, everybody, no matter how compromised your breastfeeding situation is, almost everybody, 99.99999% of women can breastfeed, okay? So everybody says, okay, so if everybody can breastfeed, then who can't? Okay, well, there are very, very, very few women who cannot breastfeed. It's a teeny tiny little, it doesn't even go into a percentage, I think, or it would be like 0.1%, cannot breastfeed. Now, however, there are many factors that mean that a mother can't breastfeed exclusively, and that is something that's fairly common. Now, in breast reduction surgery, there's a sort of triangle cut out of the bottom side of the breast, and a chunk of flesh is, I'm really giving a very brief summary, it's taken out from the bottom side of the breast is closed, and the areola is, nowadays, it's kept intact, so it's kept in connection with the mammary gland, and it's moved up on the breast so that the nipple is not hanging down the underside of the breast, okay? So, yes, we do lose a good percentage of our lactation ducts. So a woman who's had breast reduction surgery, 95% of us, those are the latest statistics that I'm aware of, 95% of us will not be able to breastfeed exclusively. So we will have to add human milk donation at best or artificial milk at worst. But what is so important when you have to add supplements is adding it at the breast and not by bottle, because an artificial nipple sucking technique is totally different from a breast sucking technique. Therefore, if a baby, for the first 3 months, it's called nipple confusion. For the first 3 months, a baby generally cannot handle the switch between breast sucking technique and bottle sucking technique. And so it's called confusion. So they can't really develop their breast sucking technique. A baby needs about 3 or 4 months to develop really expert breast sucking techniques. So if you keep sticking a bottle in his mouth, every time he has to start to learn again back on the breast. So for the first 3 months, it's called nipple confusion. After the first 3 months, it's called nipple preference. Because the artificial nipping technique requires basically no effort, they will very soon, it's just a question of time, prefer the artificial nipple. And so they will wean themselves from the breast sooner or later. So when you are in a case where you have to add supplements, like I have been for both my breastfeeding experiences, the way you can guarantee a breastfed baby in the end is by giving the milk supplement at the breast. And there's a fantastic little gadget that has been commercialized in the U.S. for that by a wonderful woman who could not conceive, so she adopted her children, and she knew the value of breast milk, so she wanted to breastfeed her adopted kids. So she breastfed them with this little thing called Lactaid, so Lactaid, Lactaid. And it's a little bag that you hang around your neck with a little ribbon from which protrudes a valve and a tiny little sonde, a tiny little feeding tube. And so when you put the baby to the breast, he will automatically, naturally take the breast. If he's young enough, if he hasn't been already seduced towards bottles, he'll take the breast. And you give him the tube, which brings the milk from the little bag hanging around your neck to the breast. So when he breastfeeds, he actually gets the supplemental milk at the breast. And little by little, the more he sucks, the more the mother's human milk starts being produced. So sooner or later, she's producing her own milk, and she can get to exclusive breastfeeding, even though the baby's been adopted. Now, if the baby's less than 6 months, of course, his needs will be very high, so he'll be breastfeeding intensely. So, yeah, there's a pretty good chance she can get to exclusive breastfeeding. Some mothers like to pump their breasts as well in order to make the milk come faster. And some mothers like to take galactagogues, which are plants that you can make into a tisane or a tea, a herbal tea to drink, which will increase the process even faster. And then there's another way you can increase the process even faster than that, which is by adding a medication that has not been approved by the FDA, but is used all over Europe and in Canada by Dr. Jack Newman for 35 years, and we've never seen any undesirable secondary effects, which is called domperidone. And if the mother takes the domperidone and she pumps and she's taking these herbal teas, she will get milk pretty darn fast. So yes, even a mother who adopts a baby can get milk. A mother who has breast reduction surgery can breastfeed. A mother who's had breast augmentation. Now, this is something that we didn't have any statistics on until Diana West, who is a lactation consultant and a lactation leader, did research on it. Now, you can go onto Diana West's websites. One of them is called Making More Milk, I think, and the other is a support forum. It's called BFAR, B-F-A-R, which means breastfeeding after reduction, meaning reduction surgery. I'm just going to see if I can get up a website. Diana West. Now, she's the one who did all the research on breastfeeding after breast reduction surgery, and she did, since nobody else was doing it, she also did, I'm just looking for her, she also did research.
Will you send us those links, Charlotte, so that we can put them on our website? Because these are the very types of links and the books you mentioned, as well as those websites and those organizations that will help mothers, because the information you're providing here is absolutely wonderful, and it'd be really great to have it available to our listeners in one place. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I got it. Oh, that's her book. She's written a book. The first book is called Defining Your Own Success, because the World Health Organization has published the official recommendations for the duration of breastfeeding. They say 6 months exclusive and up to and beyond 2 years duration of access to breast milk. Okay? So a lot of women cling to this idea of 6 months exclusive. And if you've had a medicalized birth, it's highly unlikely that you're going to be exclusively breastfeeding, at least in France. I would say the vast majority of medicalized births are exclusively breastfed. They've had some form of artificial milk by the time they get out of the maternity. If not within the following weeks, they will get some kind of artificial feeding. So unfortunately, all these mothers who cling to the idea, I'm going to breastfeed exclusively for 6 months. Oh, but damn, I haven't been able to. Whatever X problem has happened, I'm unable to breastfeed exclusively. So there's no point in breastfeeding. So they give it up. Not true. Totally false. You can breastfeed for as long as you want, and you can add supplements at the breast. As long as you have one nipple, one functioning nipple, you can breastfeed. Okay?
Right.
So,
wow,
yes, anybody can breastfeed. Now, this is the reason why I created Allaitement pour tous, because of all these women who considered themselves unqualified as breastfeeders. They didn't want to go to the community support groups. They didn't want to go to the Leche League meetings because they figured they were not qualified as breastfeeders because they couldn't breastfeed exclusively. So you can 100% breastfeed at the breast with an at-breast supplementer. Okay, so I've found her website. I will send it to you. So Diana West has now done research on breast augmentation surgery, and it turns out that about 90% of the women who have had breast augmentation surgery also have problems breastfeeding. Now, the difference between breast reduction and breast augmentation is the duration of the need for supplements. We don't know why augmentation breast mothers have problems. We think it's because the ducts are compressed by the prostheses that are in the breast, or it could be by the fact that most prostheses are inserted by a cut on the outside of the areola, which actually can, I'm not saying it does every time, but it can cut through the second, third, and fifth intercostal nerves. There are nerves coming from your ribs, and the nerves coming from your ribs signal the brain, there's a baby, the baby's nursing, you need to produce milk. And if those nerves are cut, that can affect the message. So those are two possible reasons that breast augmentation mothers are having trouble breastfeeding in the beginning. But what we do know is 90% of them are having trouble breastfeeding in the beginning. So the difference is breast reduction surgery, she probably will have to add a supplement until the child is eating table foods. So the supplement, the calories of the supplements are replaced by table foods. And a breast augmentation mother might need to add supplements. She can pump, so she can use her own milk to supplement. She can get a donation from this wonderful organization called Human Milk for Human Babies, which is called HM4, the number 4, HBB. Okay, so HM4HBB, which means Human Milk for Human Babies. It's a Facebook page where women who have too much milk can donate their milk to women who don't have enough milk. Okay, now that's that question, surgery. Hypoplasia is something where the breast is underdeveloped. It can be unilateral or bilateral. We don't know why it's underdeveloped. We suspect it's often to do with some kind of traumatism at adolescence, because men and women both have the equipment to breastfeed. So men can breastfeed. We have the equipment. Men have the equipment. The only difference is that at adolescence, women's breasts start to develop and men's don't. So every time a woman gets her period, her mammary gland develops a bit more, which explains why adolescents who have babies have a harder time getting their lactation going than a mature adult, because she's had more periods. The mammary gland develops also during pregnancy. So the more pregnancy she gets, or the more periods she gets, the more the mammary gland will develop. But hypoplasia, for some reason, the breast is underdeveloped. It won't be able to produce enough milk to exclusively breastfeed. Now, if it's unilateral, one side, yes, you can exclusively breastfeed with just one breast. There's a wonderful woman in Canada who wrote an article for Mothering Magazine. I'll send it to you. It's called, well, in French it's called, I think it's called even in English it's called One Breast is Enough. And she exclusively breastfed 5 children from the one breast she had remaining, including twins. So that's basically all you need. Now, these women who say, I couldn't breastfeed, it hurt, or whatever, it's probably, most likely, this is one of the, it's like 2/3 of the problem. 2/3 of women's reasons for not being able to breastfeed comfortably or properly is sucking technique. Now, sucking technique can be affected because the baby just isn't put at the breast often enough. It could be he's got cranial structures that are tense, could be a tense jaw. Don't forget, other cultures massage their babies at least 4 times a day. So their babies, which have a 40-day kind of reclusion period where they're kept in bed with the mother for 40 days, and the mother is massaged and the mother's taken care of, the mother is treated like a queen for 40 days, and she gets lactation going. Those babies probably have no sucking technique problems, or unless there's a tight frenulum or something. Right. Our babies, they're taken away from our bodies, they're given a bath, they're put through a battery of tests, they're stuck with needles in them, blood is drawn, they're pinpricked. Of course they're stressed. And it's even worse if they're dressed and put in a cot and told, and the mother is told not to take them into their arms too often, and even worse, the mother is told to space out the feedings for whatever reason. So all those babies are likely to have sucking technique problems, okay? But it's highly unlikely that the mother's breasts are at question in all that. And frenulums are something that affect between 12 and 25% of the population. It depends on how the assessment is made.
Now,
saggy breasts.
In the few minutes we've left, yes, I wanted to ask you to address Angeal Rose's question about the image of the women are taught to try and maintain.
Saggy breasts that's a rubbish thing. It doesn't exist. I mean, saggy breasts exist, but saggy breasts exist when pregnancies are too closely spaced together, when the mother has been pregnant without putting at least a 2 or 3 year gap between pregnancies. The human body needs to recuperate after pregnancies. So if you breastfeed, you remain infertile for longer. If you breastfeed at night, the guarantee is a lot more sure. But if you get pregnant too fast after an initial pregnancy, yes, your breast will sag, but it's nothing to do with breastfeeding. And yes, you're right, Angeal. Breastfeeding does constrict the veins, both in the uterus, which prevents hemorrhaging, and basically everywhere, which is one of the reasons we get a really good feeling, a kind of euphoric feeling when we breastfeed, because the uterus is contracting and getting back into its original shape within a few days after giving birth. Whereas if you don't breastfeed, it can take several weeks to get back into its initial space. Now, breastfeeding discreetly, do you want me to comment on that?
Yeah, do quickly. We only have a few minutes left, so we want to try and wrap it up if we can in terms of a summary.
Yes, you're right. Breasts are seen as a sexual object in most Occidental cultures, in most of the Occidental world. In many cultures, breasts are not seen as sexual objects. They're seen first as a functional organ, which is their reason for being. So for those women who are affected by this culture indoctrination of breasts being sexual objects, discreet breastfeeding is very important. I totally agree. So those women, we can all breastfeed in a wraparound sling very discreetly. We can breastfeed in a manduka or an ergo very discreetly. Nobody has to see that we're breastfeeding as we walk around going shopping or breastfeeding wherever we want to breastfeed. So if discretion is important to you, yes, it can be done in a wraparound sling, a ring sling, a manduka, an ergo, one of those physiologically correct breastfeeding baby carriers that enable the frequent feeding that's so important to getting breastfeeding going discreetly. Does that answer?
Yes, absolutely. Now, just very, very quickly, if you could, one final question is about the countries. Are there statistics that show which countries are more open, let's say, to breastfeeding than others?
Statistics on being open, no. We know that in, for example, Nigeria, I've got a statistic on Nigeria, it's only 3% of the country that breastfeeds. And that is thanks to unrestricted, unbridled marketing from breast milk substitute companies, from the industry of breast milk substitutes. They are not restricted in their marketing. So women firmly believe that if you want a big, fat, healthy baby, you give them artificial milk.
Right.
86% of the Congolese mothers who weaned before the official OMS recommendations, so who weaned early, 86% of those Congolese women said that they weaned thanks to the recommendations of the milk nurse. And the milk nurse was a Nestle employee dressed in a nurse's uniform who went around to all the young mothers who'd just given birth in her allocated department of the city to show them how to prepare a bottle and explain to them that their babies will be healthier with the artificial milk, and explain to the mother that if she wants to be modern and if she wants to be free from the constraints of being a mother, that all she has to do is feed this artificial milk by Nestle. 86% of Congolese mothers said that.
All right. And now stand by. Stay with us now for a few more minutes as we just run through what we've covered today with Charlotte Young, who is, you call yourself an activist, an equalist, and a lactivist, and a transmitter of knowledge, and we've had wonderful knowledge from you today. We spoke about breast milk is the best, but the fact that I don't deserve the best is a common belief in most humans. How humanity has accepted less because of this. And then you mentioned some website that you will send to us, I'm sure, and I hope, that lists the ingredients of breast milk and the ingredients of formula. We talked about those traditional cultures and the move from the biological norm in society. We talked about optimal neurological connection between mother and baby, the biological norm to breastfeeding, the immune qualities of colostrum, home birth, commercial interest in the birthing process and its influence. We talked a little about midwifery, of cesarean sections and its impact, the cultural indoctrinations. We've talked about mothers' meetings and the baby-friendly initiative and La Lèche League support groups. We talked about those artificial nipples, the milk supplements, and that Lactaid device, which we will put up a link to. And finally, we're closing off there with saggy breasts and the statistics from various countries. You are an absolute gem. Our listeners will be glued to this. Charlotte, we appreciate you taking the time to come on and come to us all the way from France too. We apologize, as I say, for that little skip in the line where sometimes we overtalk each other, but that's the difficulties that we encounter with the technology. But at the same time, we're very, very grateful for the fact that you're able to connect with us over those distances and bring this message to people and to mothers everywhere. Angeal Rose would like to say a couple of words in closing, and then we will have to say goodbye to you for this time.
Charlotte, I just want to say thank you so much. We still didn't cover so many aspects of this, so once again, we'll have to have you return at some point to continue this conversation, not just about breast milk, but about women in general and women in our world and where the world is going. So thank you so much for taking the time out to give us so much information. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Angeal. Thanks, Ohonu.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much, and we will talk to you again soon. And now, unfortunately, we have to bring ourselves to a close, but we will run quickly through a couple of quick announcements. The fact is that our sponsor this week is ourselves, and we would like to announce our Twin Flame Wedding Service. Ask us about ministering your special wedding day. Or if you want to sponsor an episode or the full Honest to God series, contact us at angealrose@angealrose.com. As always, the 8 Steps to Freedom is at 8stepstofreedom.com. Angeal Rose's book, A Time of Change, is at atimeofchange.info. The Nature of Reality can be pre-ordered at thenatureofreality.info. And our group, Akashic Records, Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. Pacific. You can find out information about that at worldofempowerment.com. We encourage you to sign up there because tomorrow's session is about the chakras. And as I mentioned at the outset of the program, very, very revealing information that is not available anywhere else. And if you want to search for our books on Amazon Kindle, search for Angeal Rose or myself, Ohonu, Ahonu. And then Angeal Rose will be teaching people how to read the Akashic Records in an exclusive once-off training that will take place on the 22nd of February 2014. And if you're interested, sign up on worldofempowerment.com or angealrose.com. So next week we have Penny Kelly, and if you'd like to come on the show, let us know, angealrose.com. Until next Saturday at 8 a.m. Pacific time, we send you our love, our blessings, and thank you for listening to Ohonu and Angeal Rose. And as we say in Ireland, Slán agus Benacht de Liv Galair.
All right, thank you. And don't forget Ohonu's book, The Reincarnation of Columbus, which can be pre-ordered at thereincarnationofcolumbus.com. Thank you, everyone. Until next week.